Hey guys, good to see you. How you doing?
Great. All right, good to see you. Happy New Year.
Happy
New Year.
Happy New Year.
Hey, how are you? Happy New Year to you. Good. Conrad. How are you?
Good, how you doing?
Good to see you. All right. Mr. Ford, President.
All right, Cedric, how you doing?
Good.
How you doing? Good to see you. Mr. Chairman,
Jake, how are fine? How are you doing, sir?
Good.
Okay. Oh, this is what Dallas is talking about.
Like the new arms on the
Yeah,
chair.
yeah.
I'm telling you.
Save some
No reason to
chairs.
get a new chair or
Buy
just to
some
cover
more.
the whole thing. Just do it
There
in
you
bits
go.
and pieces.
You don't know how important they are until they're not there. Think about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. How are you?
All right.
Good.
Came out with Gussie.
Yeah.
So, say hello. Hello, man.
All right, should we get started? I'll just call the meeting to order. I just had a couple comments before we sort of move to the formal agenda, Cedric, if I could. First off, I think as everybody knows, Kate Todd will be joining us for the meeting here beginning this evening. So I think, as you know, Kate joined us by a teleconference the other day. She had orientation last week, so we'll certainly take a chance to spend time tonight with her informally, but we'll certainly invite her to make some comments to the board tomorrow. Second thing is, we are, just for planning purposes for today, we are gonna have a closed session. So we've got a couple hours blocked off, but do think in the back of our minds, I think we wanna have a half hour-ish or so, I think, Cedric, for some things that you're gonna wanna talk to
Sure.
the full board in closed session on Saturday, so I wanna be sure that the executive committee has a heads up on that. Tomorrow morning, we'll actually also have a closed session. We're gonna have Andrew Ferguson from the Attorney General's office come speak about just some of the views, I think, that the Governor's office and the Attorney General in Richmond have around transgender issues. And so, as you know, we're trying to gather information around these sorts of things. So tomorrow morning, we've arranged to have him speak, actually, so tomorrow morning we'll have that. The other item is, also you saw in the package, some bylaw changes, and I think one of the things, we've gotten some feedback already. So Conrad is gonna be, as chair of the nominating committee, just sort of getting some feedback here, so there'll be nothing that we'll bring to the board for approval, but we'll use it now, between now and the May meeting, I think, Conrad, to gather some feedback and bring something back to the board at that point. Is that a fair way to describe it?
Yes, that's fair.
Good. But those are the only other sort of general thoughts I had, but anything else from anybody else? Otherwise, we'll jump into the approval of the minutes, and just move our way through.
Do we have a revised, schedule for tomorrow?
Yes, sir, it should be in the packet, or on the board.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
Teddy, it's in the portal.
Yeah. Right. I hope we can take a minute sometime today to talk about the portal and on board.
Okay, absolutely, yeah, that was, the intent was to try to make it more efficient.
Yeah.
That's.
I think it is, but we're gonna have to learn and
Yeah.
adjust as we go.
Well, I made a half joke, I think, to Bill, it's quite impactful when you see it's got 700 plus pages.
723.
It was impactful.
And you realize much of them are attachments, maybe there's a different way we can organize it, so that the meat of the book can be a
So
little
you
more
know what
clear.
you're looking at.
Yeah, no,
If we could take a couple
yeah,
minutes.
absolutely.
Yeah, we could also, instead of doing one big meeting, we could do, big meeting and then committee meetings, and then that would create several other books, ones
Yeah.
that you may not be on, you could just scan it.
Yeah, while we're talking about Tate, let's just
Yeah.
just
Those
tackle
are
this one now.
The main things.
Okay.
It's, when you look at the 723 pages, or even when you go to the committee meetings, some of them, in my case, AF&P, which has a lot of pages, you can't really tell when you look at a document, is this background, is this for action, is this, what part of this should I really focus on? So, if we could have some sort of cover letter or on each of these things, or maybe per committee, just, hey, this post facilities master plan, these 95 pages, this is background, this
Right,
is,
right.
Rather than
Okay.
wondering about it.
Yeah,
To do that.
I think Bill, if I'm looking, the nods are on the table, everybody's kind of got that same sort of
No,
view, I think, too, so I think, again, that's 700
Particularly
plus.
AF&P.
Yeah, the 700 pages, and it just sort of, where's the meat part of it, so yeah, it would, wade through it, so maybe, I'd be happy to be a sounding board between now and the next meeting, or Teddy, I'm sure you would as well, too.
Yeah.
It's, the tool is here, and it's good, but if we can.
Well, didn't Dallas try to do that with the memo he sent around this morning?
After he and I talked.
Yeah.
Now I see where that memo came from.
Yeah, cause, you know, we were talking about it, and he, I mean, he knew, we both were saying this is, it's the future, we need to do this, but we just need to learn from it.
Absolutely.
Tight.
Try to envision 700 pages if it was actually
I know.
printed out, actually,
Yeah.
but it
Yeah.
masks it actually when it's
There it is.
digital. And there it is.
The
But,
other,
go ahead.
another comment I wanted to make is, and this, maybe it doesn't relate to on-board just as much as it does experience with board meetings. The read ahead materials are a little inconsistent. Some committees are very thorough. Like Inclusive Excellence has great material in it. External Affairs, great material. AF&P. Athletics never does.
Yeah.
And it's been that way for a while. And, you know, if you look at their agenda, meeting new staff is one, well, put the bios in ahead of time. The budget we know is an issue, put that in there, there's more that can be done there to be consistent.
Incidentally, I did reach out to them today and asked, you know, okay, you just got an agenda here for the, as a placeholder, do you have any handouts? So they should have those to me this evening before they leave, and I'll load them in the portal as well.
Okay.
To add to your 700.
Yeah, and the other comment about the 723 pages is getting them 3 days in advance or whatever is really tough. If you
Yeah.
can get them.
Well, the vast majority were up there on, last Thursday.
Okay.
So,
So, yeah, that's better.
But, we'll work on all that after, including the agenda setting too, you know.
But I'm supportive of
Yeah.
using it.
Yeah,
It's
I
better-
understand.
It's better than the system we have for our board meetings at work, so.
Yeah, good. We'll work on that, and again, I think we all saw the volume is just, we can bring this down to something that's a little easier to focus on the real issues. Anything else before we jump into the agenda? I think.
I do have one thing.
Go ahead, I guess.
And more like, I'm not sure when to bring this up, but, and not sure what we can really do about it, but, you know, some of the public comments we get, you know, are great and thoughtful and whatever, I read everything. And some of the comments, are a little bit abusive. I think we've seen one recently, you know, targeting specific, employees that work here based on, you know, who they are, and, I don't know if there's anything we can do about it, but I certainly think that it's our duty, you know, as people who are overseeing, you know, people who work here and they come to work every day, and they should be subject to personal attacks and abusive comments. And I don't know what we can do about it from the public comment side, but as some of these comments are coming from members of our community, I don't know, if just saying something in their board meeting, which I'm happy to do, just asking for
It's
people to
great.
be civil, because people don't need to be subject to
No.
personal attack when they come to work.
I think what we've been trying to do is be sure that you see everything, the board sees everything, so that's why even with the portal, it's so easier to sort of populate that with virtually everything, but then there is the good and the bad and the ugly actually with the everything
Yeah.
point too, so. Cedric, maybe I'll ask you a little bit too, cause when it gets personal, you know, any thoughts on what we should do or can do as a board? Or, you know, sometimes when you react to it, it actually gives it some credibility, that's what I worry about sometimes, so it's a little bit trying to figure out the right strategy here, and is it affecting some, you know?
I mean, to me, it goes back to the comment I made last year about, kind of a toxic environment and how it affects the overall workforce. But I think we'll probably have to put our heads together, with Bill and kind of figure out, in terms of what state law says about public comments, whether or not, there's something that we can do about those that are, have a negative, a very, very hostile, negative, toxic bent to them. So we can put our heads together and just see, if there's something we can do. I don't know if there's some redactions that can occur, or if, you know, we can forewarn people that say, hey, if you send something in here that's, you know, targeted, toxic, you know, those types of things, then it won't be posted. So but we need to look at it and see what the.
There is guidance before people give verbal comments, actually.
Yes.
So the question is, we don't really have that same guidance
Yeah.
per se, do we, Bill, for written?
No, and when I send out the public notice, we could always encourage people to,
Maybe that's part of the policy, is because
be civil.
there is that sort of
Yeah.
Because-
standing language for the verbal comment.
Right.
I don't know that there's, you know, I don't know that there's any way
Yeah,
those things are subject to public disclosure.
right.
I like the idea of putting something in there when you
Yeah.
put it out, hey, be civil, you know, be respectful, and if nothing else, you know, people are gonna probably read it if you're civil
Yeah.
about it. If you're not, then nobody's gonna pay attention to it. I don't think, you know, having somebody decide that's too ugly, let's don't post it is the way to go.
No,
I don't know if we can.
We've all heard worse.
yeah.
But, still,
Well,
it's, a good reminder is
That's
nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anything else?
I have one more,
Sure.
Tom,
Yeah, go
just,
ahead, Teddy.
and I've talked with, some folks here about it, but I just wanna, this is a board issue, the inclusive excellence training. We were supposed to get a copy of the training schedule. That didn't happen, and so we missed the first, semester. Last year we did get them, and board members, some made efforts to get up here and attend the training sessions for the cadets, and I think that was very helpful. You know, we get a lot of concern around the transparency and, the training, and there's nothing like being able to talk to people that are asking me about it. And so, I attended it, and this was my impressions of it.
Right.
You know, and even, we could probably encourage some members of the alumni agencies to attend those sessions, but, we now have the second semester session dates, but the rats, they were all first semester.
Right.
You know, those are the ones I think we're most interested in, so as a practice, can we not have to ask for that, and
Right.
just get those at the beginning of the semester, so.
We can get that. So we would know that at the August meeting, or September meeting, wouldn't we then? We would have the full schedule, I think. So we agree on that.
September?
Yeah,
For the semester.
for the
anyway.
semester, yeah, exactly. Okay,
Yep, from a plan, we just make sure we backward plan,
yeah,
so that we have those things, laid out.
Yeah. okay,
Absolutely.
good.
Thank you.
Yeah, so sorry to jump in,
No.
but so we have a meeting before every semester. We sit down with Title IX, we sit down with Honor Court, because we're all sharing that time, and we plan it out. So all of the dates are in advance, we're talking about it in a group, but after we have that meeting, I can make sure that it gets over to the
Okay.
board.
Thank you.
Thanks, good, Brianna. Anything else? Just, one administrative matter, we have, the minutes for approval, can I have a motion to approve? Is there a second? Any opposed? Then stand approved then, thanks so much. Cedric, I think we turn to you then.
Okay, thank you, Mr. President, board members of the executive committee, and I appreciate you all being here. Happy New Year. Good to have you all here again. I thought you might see a little snow.
Yeah, I thought
as
so
you
too.
came in, but
Yes.
since the temperatures are creeping up to
No.
the fifties and sixties here over the next couple of days, we won't be that lucky. But
Yeah.
literally have had snow up until probably about a day ago, 2 days ago here, even though we probably only got about 3 inches. So for the board meeting, as it starts tomorrow, what I typically do here is just kind of hit some of the highlights, and then there are a couple specific topics that I would like to bring to the attention of the ex-com, particularly in the closed session, about some personnel matters. And so, as far as the highlights go for tomorrow's session, and this is obviously the January board meeting, and we typically try to talk about kind of a standard set of topics in the January board meeting, that are centered around, you know, how did we start the year, how did the first semester go? So for tomorrow, one of the first things we're gonna do is communications and marketing, has put together a nice video, highlighting some of the valued work of our employees, and so we're gonna show that to you, probably no more than about 1.5 to 2 minutes long. Just some of the additional kind of marketing efforts that are ongoing now that communications and marketing is up to full staff with the exception of, the director of communications and marketing. However, we have, the assistant director, she has stepped up to be, the acting director for communications and marketing, which is Michelle Elwood, Michelle Elwood. As far as the events that I will bring up, obviously we're, back in full swing. Cadets got back here, I think it was a Sunday, as classes started to wear around the 15th. But for the first semester, you know, I'll talk about a number of the activities and events that took place, and just kind of hit the highlights of them. So, leadership, conference, was started off and will go until about the March timeframe. We have a leader in residence this year, Brigadier General retired Chris Burns, who spent his career in the United States Army, has a special ops background, has already been on post, has already connected with the cadets on a number of opportunities. We've got the full suite of speakers in the leadership program that the CLE puts on, so I'll hit that. Had a wonderful Founders Day parade and Founders Day sequence of events where we had the opportunity to honor Mr. Conrad Hall. He was the recipient of the Newmarket Medal. I'll talk a little bit about that again. We had the ring figure, I'll hit that. And then one of the big things that I want to talk about is just kind of the debate series that we started over a year ago, but it's kind of now in full swing, using the organization Braver Angels. So we have a Braver Angels debate format that we do. There's been a number of topics that we've talked about, probably had about 5 or 6 debates that are being conducted, led by 3 of our faculty and staff here, from our ECBU department, Colonel Valentina Demetrio-Brazel, Kim Conley out of the CLE, and then Sarah Whipple out of our psychology department. So I'll just hit that so that everyone knows, and I'll talk a little bit more about what those topics were. And then there's kind of a bleed over of that series of events into my participation as a panelist for an event that was hosted by UVA, that hosted the Governor's High Education Summit on Free Speech and Intellectual Diversity, where I was asked to speak on, you know, how VMI is incorporating those types of things. And so I'll talk a little bit about the Braver Angels in that context, and how particularly the last one that we did, which was on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and whether or not it has value and gets conducted properly when you have a format built around civility. I'll talk a little bit about that because that one was unique in that during that debate, not only did we have students from the Corps of Cadets here, we also had students from W&L, we had students from Mountain Gateway Community College, and then we had students from Southern University. So all very, very unique colleges with very, very unique perspectives, but we all had that opportunity to come together for this Braver Angels debate. So I'll talk about that. For the second year in a row, we've got a Ranger Challenge team that finished first in the brigade competition, qualifying to go to Sandhurst to compete in the Best Ranger competition that's going to take place in the springtime. And they're getting maximum opportunity to train and get prepared for that. Last year, if you recall, our Ranger Challenge team finished 5th nationally but was probably one of the younger teams, to compete in the competition. So, now with a little bit more experience and more veteran folks, they're looking to go back and hopefully, do better, and come out with a good performance, but, it's a real strong team.
Without getting into the details, what exactly are the events you compete against? Is it
Oh.
all physical, or is it broader than that?
It's pretty intense, and it's a lot of physical stuff. I don't know that there's any kind of classroom environment. I mean, you're talking rucksacks, you're talking planning patrols, and doing
Okay.
a lot of things like that. There's probably some types of either marksmanship training that goes along with that, or marksmanship execution that goes along with that, whether it's small, medium, or large caliber weapons. So,
Is that the best? Fifth place nationally is probably the best we've ever done.
I'd have to go back. I don't know exactly.
In recent memory.
In recent
Yeah,
memory.
I think so,
In
yeah.
recent memory.
Yeah.
Yeah, that probably is, but I'd have to go and see what our history's been. But, I know, as it was brought to my attention, and I got a chance to go down there and meet the team and shake their hands and take some pictures with them. It was told to me that being such a young team, it was a pretty, significant feat, for them to accomplish, that level of finish, because as I recall, Best Ranger competition also includes active duty teams.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So, more to follow on that, but I just wanted to highlight that. Obviously, some recognitions are occurring for both our faculty and our staff, and our cadets, and I'll hit a couple of those highlights. It's just kind of highlighted events that have occurred over this past semester. Our chief of staff, obviously, as a student athlete, Kate Taylor, she's class of 24. She was recognized as a top athlete, and recipient of the 300 Student Award. If you've seen Kate and had a chance to talk to her, you know how impressive she is. So she continues to do some great things. I'll talk about that. A number of our cadet athletes that have received recognition, both for their work as on the field, but also their work in the classroom. A number of them received Player of the Week honors throughout the semester, both from our football team, and I think we had a track athlete that was recognized for Athlete of the Week. And then a number of our student athletes were recognized as academic all-conference for the work that they're doing in the classroom and how they're performing. Coach Danny Rocco, I'll talk about him. He was National Coach of the Year finalist this year, for being a first-year head coach, and just kind of bringing us back from a very, very poor outing the year before in the conference, and in terms of our overall performance, to how well the team performed this past year. And he's very, very optimistic about where the team can go for this upcoming year. And he's proud of the work that they're doing. He talked during the KEDEP Club Board of Governors meeting, and he talked about just kind of the difference that a year has made in the attitudes of the young men in the Corps, restoring kind of a sense of, hey, we can compete to win. And so that's gonna be good. Then of course we had the Christmas holiday celebrations, but before we got to that, we had our graduation ceremony that took place just before the end of the semester, where 35 cadets graduated, 4 of whom were distinguished graduates, meaning they attained a GPA of 3.5 or better. 5 graduated with distinction, which is they had GPAs between 3.0 and 3.49. 9 are going into the Army as commissionees. We also had 2 May of 2023 graduates come back who weren't able to get, and they came back to get commissioned at U.S. Coast Guard. We'll talk about where we stood. Obviously, our recruiting numbers from last semester with the start of this RAC class, we brought in 491, 492 when you count the one readmit that we had, and how this particular rat mass is going as we lead, as we head to breakout. The cadet leaders came in and briefed me last week on their breakout plan, and a number of the activities have already started. They had, I think it was last week, Bill, last Saturday, not this past Saturday, last Saturday, they had a scheduled 12-mile road march. If you all remember, temperatures were below freezing temperatures. They did it at dark 30, and so that event occurred. It was curtailed a little bit to a 2-hour march, only out of safety for the cadets because the temperatures were so low. But going on with the numbers, we brought in 491. The goal last year was 450, so we exceeded our goal. The recruiting for the next RAT class is already underway, and things are looking very, very good. The goal for this recruiting class is 495, and as of Wednesday, the applications, appointments, and deposits are nearly 2 times the number they were the year before. Average GPA of those appointments that have occurred so far is about 3.79. As far as the Call to Duty scholarship, we have committed for a second year to make sure that happens, along with the support from the alumni agencies. And so to date, we've got about 109 applications for the Call to Duty scholarship. We announced it somewhere around November, early December timeframe, a little earlier than we did last year, but immediately upon announcement, you start getting a flood of applications from young men and women who are seeking that 3 or 4 year ROTC scholarship. Right now, we've awarded 11 to date, 9 from out of state, 2 from in-state, and so again, consistent with the strategy that we're employing, that's going to be helpful to us in terms of our revenue by bringing in federal dollars in the form of those scholarships, along with out-of-state students, certainly and in-state students as well. I'll talk a little bit about another initiative that we're starting up this year. We were approached by the class of '74, Ronnie Norman, and but they've made a proposal to us about starting a program that's being called Passive Review. It's very similar to a program that West Point conducts where the 50-year reunion class of alum, they come back and we have various different events where they can connect with the class that's in their dike line, so that they can act as mentors and help them as they proceed through their cadetship, and begin to think about what they're going to do as they head out into whatever chosen career path. So I'll talk a little bit about that. We solidified the program. It's going to highlight 6 key events that over the course of a cadetship, that 50-year class connects with, that class starting with their RAT year, and on through their first class year. And so there'll be 6 events over the course of time in which those things happen.
There's the thought that if that's successful, then Cedric, every class, it's the 74, so continue to move on.
Yeah, so essentially we will, and this was one of the things we really had to work on kind of from a negotiating standpoint, was we will literally have 4 classes, 50-year classes, making
Right.
different touch points. So it does, but when you break it out year by year, there might be an event in their first year, there may be a second event in their second year.
Okay.
And so it's kind of stair-stepped, so it doesn't overwhelm. And we also worked to connect them with existing forums that occur, so it doesn't just kind of overwhelm an already busy schedule for cadets.
And back to the Call to Duty, do we have a budget this year, or do you feel like it's a constraint in terms of the amount we have to put into that program?
Yeah.
That's what's so powerful, actually.
Yeah, so we've gotten a commitment from the agencies, and they are working on their fundraising piece of it.
Okay.
I think the firm commitment, as I recall during the meeting, was not $1 million, right? Because again, you find yourselves in a position, where $1 million over every year, you know, in 4 years of a cadetship, you're talking about a pretty substantial endowment that you have to grow.
Right.
And that's gonna have to grow over time. So what we've done is we've kind of come to terms with the committed portion that they would give, and then some of the financial aid monies that we normally have budgeted for, we see ourselves repurposing that, geared more towards Call of Duty. Because that seems to be, a very, a program that's gonna help us into the future.
Yeah.
I think Bob, told me today, we were talking a little bit about it, that, probably were it not for Call to Duty, our enrollment numbers probably would have been somewhere around 450. So we would have been that between that and then changing the caps, I think it was.
Yes, sir.
The caps as well.
Across all programs.
Across all programs. So, yeah, we plan on keeping that program on, because I know we recognize the competitors are doing the same thing. The next thing I'll talk about is the strategic plan and where we are on that.
General,
Yes.
can I ask you a question
Sure.
too on the rats? Do you have the numbers on how many returned second semester?
Bob has the numbers.
Tomorrow's fine.
Yeah, he'll brief those. They're in the academic
Will we
affairs
get-
portion.
Will we get briefed too on the academic performance?
Yes.
Tomorrow?
Yes,
Good.
they're both of those are in.
Alright, thank you.
So the strategic plan, where we are on the strategic plan, leads, have been assigned to the 5 strategic areas. And then, co-leads, either co-leads or leads, a primary and an alternate, have been assigned to each one of those, areas. They are in the process of identifying, the specified and implied tasks associated with, those 5 initiatives that are written in the strategic plan. As they continue to do their work, then they are also identifying the metrics that need to be associated so we measure progress. They will be the stakeholders, they will be the plank owners of each one of those initiatives. And then we're gonna pull all of that together so that, as I briefed during the November board meeting, we'll be able to lay out for the board the metrics associated with each one of those initiatives and then the plan going forward. And so I'll talk a little bit about that, but that's essentially where we are on the work on the strategic plan. And we are also working through, timeline wise, when we want to roll that strategic plan out. And so there's a lot of work going into that from a marketing perspective, from the metrics obviously, and then how we wanna lay things out to show, you know, over time, how the strategic plan will be implemented, getting us to across that 10-year period. Because some things we've already started, some things we will have to plan for, schedule, and get the resources to begin work on here over the next 2 to 5 years, and then some things will continue to move on. But that's where we are on that, and that work is gonna be continuing on.
Is there a day you think the marketing piece kind of triggers, so we're more public about all this?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
have a chance to really make an event of it?
Yes,
Yeah.
so the idea right now, I think that given what we've said we were gonna do by letting the board know and make sure the board is okay with the metrics and how we're gonna measure ourselves, I think what it'll do is it'll set us up where we'll work through the summer. We brought a team on, to do, some work in terms of helping us understand kind of where our holes are from a marketing perspective and how we ought to go about putting that whole thing together. And my timeline is that we we would probably roll something out in the fall, with a marketing plan, a full-blown splash of the strategic plan where we get out and we start, messaging it to folks, talking about it. We'll have the metrics done by then. We probably will have, some visualization, some visual graphics, if you will, of some of the key areas like facilities, and then other areas, and then we'll probably, have kind of, whatever the marketing pitch, is gonna be. It will either be done in initial phase, or we'll have something that's fully ready to go out. So the timeline we're shooting for is to do that in the fall. Along with that, and now that we've gotten to the point where, the strategic plan itself, the base document is done, what I've asked Jim Miller to do, is, we're gonna pull together a task force. And it's gonna be a task force that's gonna kind of chart the way ahead, for athletics as it pertains to, VMI. Tom, the board president and I, we were talking, about this, a little earlier. And I think that when you look at the strategy and the 5 initiatives, a lot of the things that are contained in the strategic plan centered around academic excellence, centered around, cadet life, so on and so forth. All of those things will come about, in a number of ways that will require resources, and in a lot of instances, those resources will come from 2 primary places: state funding, provided we can secure additional state funding, and or private giving. And then, obviously, a main component of the strategic plan is managing cost over time as it pertains to tuition, for the students. When it comes to athletics, obviously, athletics only operates based off of, number one, student fees, right? And that presents a challenge for us, but certainly, it also is gonna be a result of private giving. And so what we wanna do is, we're gonna have this task force come together and do a couple things. One of the first things is, just kind of restate or reaffirm the value proposition of athletics as it pertains to VMI, right? Is it important? How important is it as it pertains to being one of the 3 legs of the stool, right? And then come up with a set of goals and objectives, as it pertains to, athletics, and then what are the resource requirements? And by doing that, we're trying to lay out a long-term plan on how we want to see athletics operate and what level of funding is gonna be necessary for us to operate that way. And if we can't get there, then we're gonna have to make some tough choices. And so right now, we're gonna have a lean task force. It's gonna involve, the athletic director leading the effort. I've already talked to Danny Thornton about having someone from the KeyDeg Club be a part of it. Probably both as one of the board members from the KeyDeg Club, and perhaps, someone from the staff, side of the KeyDeg Club as well. And then board member, I've talked to Damon Williams about, participation of either himself or somebody from the board, on the task force. And then we'll have a member from the faculty. So it's gonna be a small group, probably no more than about, 6 or 7 people. And their task is gonna be to come up with a set of recommendations to me for decisions about where we're gonna go. And they're gonna look at a number of things. They're gonna look at some things we've been talking about with respect to the number of athletic teams that we have, right? Do we have the right number, and consistent with the resources and the resource needs? And do we have the right number of teams? Do we have the right number? Do we have the right mix of teams? Taking into account, what we obviously have to have to fulfill Title IX requirements in terms of, women's sports and men's sports. And so they're gonna come up with that, and we'll lay out things that will be consistent with how we'll build, momentum towards a campaign of which, idea would be that as we talk about a campaign, we would be able to describe kind of the financial needs for athletics, right? Because as I've said a couple times, you know, I've got 4 studies that have been sitting on my desk, all of which I've now read, that over the course of the early 90s, all the way probably up to the 2010s, have described in various different ways the challenges of athletics with respect to how you fund them and how you get the right type of performance out of them. So that's the path we're gonna get on with respect to the athletic funding. As far as the budget as it pertains right now, Jim will be able to talk about the implementation of those 6 of those 7 recommendations that we talked about and where we are on those. We've also started doing quarterly budget execution briefs to kind of track more closely expenditures that are occurring in the Institute with our budget overall, but also with the athletic budget. And right now, where we sit, and so right now we sit somewhere just about halfway through the academic year. We're probably sitting about halfway through our burn rate, right? So about 50, just slightly over about 53% of our resources institute-wide are still remaining, and we burn through about 10% more from an athletic perspective. So we'll continue to do that to make sure that we have good visibility.
Comment on that?
Sure.
I suppose we'll be talking about this more, but the athletics budget, the forecast for the year has some noise in it because there's some special projects, expenditures for special projects and matching revenue to go with those. About 600,000 worth. But if you strip those out and look at the performance against the budget, there's the forecast is that spending will be right on budget. And if it was a normal business or piece of VMI, that would be fine. But when we're bleeding, it's not fine.
Sure.
So, from my perspective is on the AF&P, I can't see any evidence of progress being made on tightening spending.
Okay. So I think Jim will be able to describe kind of the 6 initiatives that we've done. Some of them are not gonna have an immediate impact. One of the additional things that we're doing, again, with the budget execution reviews that we're doing, is I asked Dallas and his team to kind of break into some of the things that have contributed to what's gonna happen with the budget here over the next year or 2. Now, we know that kind of in the out years, beyond 2 years, when we restore the core size back to the normal size, we know that, at least based on the projections, that the athletic budget will come back into alignment. But there's been a number of things that we've talked about that contributed to the imbalance that exists in the budget right now. And again, the first and foremost is the overall low core size that exists. And I just talked about where we see ourselves here with respect to our recruiting numbers. Based on the numbers that we see right now, we're in good shape, we believe, to hit the 495 goal. And so Joe will be prepared to talk about that in detail. But I think what we're seeing also with those numbers is that there's the potential that we might bring in more cadets than that 495. Obviously, if that happens, then that helps our overall fiscal picture to include athletics. The second component that affected our athletic budget again was our unfunded mandates. Those successive 5%, 5%, and 7% salary increases that the state directed and only partially funded. And I felt the right thing to do with the staff that we have across the institute was to make sure that people who work in the athletic department receive those same types of increases. And so they did. Right now, for the budget that was submitted this year, I think that the increase is only targeted at like 1% and maybe $1,000 bonus or something that was in the governor's budget, which would end up being much more manageable. The third thing, and this was something that was brought to light as we were having a conversation about the indirect budget or the indirect fees, was the impact on the institute when it comes to another unfunded mandate, which is more in line with federal impact, is this VMSDEP, which is a veterans subsidy that allows any student to go whose parent has a disability, 90% or higher, and draws a fully disabled rating. It allows their kids to go to colleges free of charge. And what we've seen is that there's been a substantial increase in the number of students that are coming to VMI, so that's impacted us as well. And then the indirect fees. The indirect fees and how we calculate those and how we charge those has had a pretty significant. So those are the main components. I think that what Jim has described and the things that I approved really caused me to recognize that we're pretty constrained when it comes to doing cuts in the athletic budget itself. Jim described and I approved certain things like the number of games that we would play in total in some sports, and then also the number of revenue games that we would pick up that might do things to enhance the budget. The other thing Jim proposed and I approved and we've been working on is to get a person in a filled position to go after corporate sponsorships. So there's a series of those things. It's just a matter that the reality is going to take time. So what Dallas and the team owe me is a deeper look on how we would really just kind of lay out how we feel the bill, that a large part of that bill that could bring the budget in alignment that's directly affected by indirect costs. Indirect costs is, those are bills that the institute pays as a whole for gas, water, electric, but there's a chargeback that we have to apply to to athletics, and it's based on a calculation. That's a must-pay bill. That bill's going to get paid no matter what. So I think from an accounting perspective, we can properly highlight it in such a way where people know it's a chargeback, but it's being paid by the institute, which we're able to do, and recognize that the bills for athletics are going to get paid.
We haven't gotten the budget performance section from the athletics committee yet. You're saying that's coming tonight. I wonder if it's gonna be helpful to get to Teddy's question, because, the couple pages in the AF&P big book are kind of there, but there's more that needs to be done instead. You don't have any clue what's gonna be coming?
I don't.
Okay. I just went back and double checked the agenda for athletics. It's a line item here. I just don't know what, is it just the same stuff that the
I asked earlier today if they had more materials, and they said they would get them to me.
They should, what I asked Jim to put forward was kind of a description of the implementation of those, and then kind of where we sit in terms of the budget right now. And like I said, the ongoing discussion and the ongoing work about one of those major components, the indirect costs.
Right.
I'm waiting on Dallas and his team to come back to me, because some of this affects also what we'll come in with in May, and Dallas will talk about these in the assumptions that we'll use going into the deliberations about what happens with, tuition and fees for this next year. And so he'll talk about that as well. Okay. Does that answer your question?
Well, it doesn't change my observation.
Sure.
That there is no cost cutting against budget this year. The other observation is that the fund balance is gone for athletics, it's negative now. And so, bills are getting paid, but they're getting paid out of the Institute's fund balance.
Right, through the auxiliary.
Right. And there will be into the foreseeable future until we get our arms around it, because what we've seen so far in the projections is that restoring the core sizes, it doesn't fix this problem.
Correct.
So, we identified this as a place that needs work, and
Right.
we just haven't seen any, we need to see what we're gonna do and how that's gonna impact the financials.
Sure. Okay.
And,
Again, keep our fingers crossed, maybe some of Bill, some of the stuff that we've got tonight helps us. Okay,
Just got it.
yeah, please, yeah,
Great. This is maybe good.
thank you.
Okay. Next topic we'll talk about is just kind of some of the things as the legislative session has begun. I've already been to talk to legislators twice about kind of high priority needs for the Institute, both in terms of operational funding and in terms of capital funding. Our list this year is very, very small. We're hearing signals both from the administration as well as from legislation, what the appetite is gonna be for both capital funding and operational funding. However, I think right now we're positioned pretty well to get support for our top initiatives based on discussions that we've had with members of the legislature on both the House side and the Senate side. And so we're gonna continue to work that. We've had a number of legislators that have already come to post, as well as members of the administration that have come to post this year. Delegate Campbell, Ellen Campbell, she's been to post. I've also had an office call with her up in Richmond here this past week. She's supportive of our efforts. She's gonna be a patron of some of our operational requirements that we've laid out. Delegate Austin is now our delegate. He's also the chairman, and I think he's not the chairman because he's not in the majority, but he's very, very influential in the legislature. He's gonna be committed to support us as well. And then Secretary of Finance Steve Cummings has been to post and taken tours. All these folks have taken tours. Some of them have been to VMI before, some of them have never been there. But it's all about kind of building relationships and building goodwill with the members of the legislature. We've got more to come here starting next week when I'll be back in Richmond on Monday to meet with more members of the legislature. And then I'll finish off my trip to Richmond on Tuesday, speaking at the Commonwealth Club.
It may actually have been in the external relations materials, but do we also have, are we gonna have another one of those days in Richmond where we bring the cadets and everything else?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, the
Legislative perception.
Yeah,
perception.
yeah,
It'll take
I was
place.
thinking the word actually.
The word.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it, okay.
Yeah, look it up for you. I've got it, you know.
Okay.
We resumed those last year and the intent is to continue.
But just, as you know, in the bios of all the new members, it's a big group.
Yeah,
And,
big turnover, huge turnover.
Yeah, it's,
Huge turnover. We continue to meet with some of those. I think, as government relations, Kim Parker described, on the Senate side, even though there was a good bit of turnover, and certainly we, lost Senator Norman, the new members on the Senate side, actually quite a few of them have experiences having been in the legislature before, but on the House side.
Okay.
So not as much turbulence or just flat out inexperience, all new to, the whole legislative process, whereas on the House side, it's been significant turnover, and a lot of the members are just flat out new.
It's February 22.
Okay, yeah, good, great.
Okay. And then, just a couple of other things, like I said, I also briefed the budget formulation, work that's ongoing, so that when we get to the May board meeting, we'll have a recommendation about going into 2024-2025 academic year, the recommendation on tuition and fees, for the core cadets. I'll highlight a couple of recognitions that have taken place among our faculty as well. We've got two members that were recognized by the Southern Conference for their support for cadets and the overall VMI community. Jeff Kendrick and Michelle Murphy, and the work that they've been doing. I'll talk a little bit about a partnership agreement, a number of partnership agreements that have taken place this year, but one in particular recently with Valley Forge Military Academy up in Pennsylvania. And it's a partnership agreement which should, again, similar to the one with Oak Ridge, will allow good qualified candidates to apply to VMI and get favorable consideration provided they meet the requirements. We have had a number of distinguished visitors that have come to post here. Most recently, just yesterday, we had the Chief of Defense Force for the Swedish military. He was here yesterday, had an opportunity to speak to members of the Corps cadets. Somewhere around 200, 250 cadets were over in the Hall of Valor, where he talked to them. I spent the morning with him and had lunch with him, he and a number of cadets and some faculty. And then he spoke to the cadets, well received, had a great message. As we know, if you're following kind of things that are going on in the international arena, what the country of Sweden is trying to do in terms of entry into as a NATO nation, recognition as a NATO nation. And then we also, this past Saturday, had the director of the Secret Service, Director Cheadle, came to post, and she brought with her a contingent of Secret Service officers that are VMI graduates and a contingent that are Citadel graduates. So obviously we got a chance to take the game in. We parked the Citadel folks all the way down on the end, and we gave the prime seats to the VMI contingent and the director herself. But it was a good opportunity for her to really speak to cadets and say, what kind of people am I looking for in my workforce? And she spoke a phenomenal message that she gave to the cadets, just to kind of get them an understanding of, hey, as you begin to transition, right, if you want to be ready on the day after graduation, these are the things that you're going to have to do and think about. These are the attitudes that you're going to have to bring. This is the professionalism that you're going to have to bring. You're going to have to accept and understand that you're going into a very, very diverse workforce, and that she needs that to build strong teams that are a part of her organization. So it was well received. She was very, very enthused about what she saw. They wanted to use that as an opportunity to, again, recruit potential cadets who were interested, whether they're going into the military now and see this as a future for them, or whether they're still looking for employment as they graduate. So those two events were good. Joe and Shannon, they're going to talk about
another notable victory against Citadel. So
Yeah.
actually did all kind of
Yeah.
work that I know he was always wanting to bring that.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah,
Yes,
so.
indeed. Citadel. We've Jim and the athletic department. They went out and procured a bulldog and painted it kind of in Citadel. I think it's in the Citadel colors. And for every VMI sports team that beats the Citadel, they become the recipient of this bulldog. And so it was passed, I don't think it was passed from Coach Rocco.
Women's soccer.
Women's soccer, because they were the last ones to defeat the Citadel team. And so it was passed over to, Andrew Wilson, so Coach Wilson and the basketball team, they're in possession of the bulldog right now. Joe and Shannon will give a more detailed brief on admissions, where we look and where we sit from an enrollment perspective, and kind of give a little bit of update on financial aid and where we are on that. And then Bob will talk about academic performance. He'll talk a little bit about some of the changes that we've begun to make with the STP program, and then the summer school changes, and then the hiring of new personnel. He'll introduce our new registrar and our new MAC director. And then there's still some work that we're doing that's going to be a part of the strategic plan going forward. And also as we begin to think about how we're going to bring in some Pell recipients with the Pell grant that we received to allow them to come to STP, because we know the benefits of STP, and we want to better measure that going forward, the overall impact of STP for cadets to come here, and does it lead, or how well does it lead to them being successful? And then Dallas will talk about budget priorities and amendments and so on and so forth.
Is the entire football team gonna participate next year in STP?
Haven't talked to Jim about that, but I believe that's the plan. I think Coach Rocco saw that as a huge benefit for his student athletes. Yeah.
And Bob will be in a position to talk about the registrar, the issues associated with the
He
registrar.
will.
Yeah.
He will. I was going to touch on a few here right now. So you know, as you all are aware, somewhere around the second week in November, the registration window opens up for cadets. Now, when this registration window opens, and this was something I certainly didn't know as a cadet, but you know, I have now a very, very competent dean who can kind of spell this stuff out for me. It is intended to create a demand signal for classes, for faculty teaching the class, for sections and times in which those classes occur. And so this window opened up, and cadets are allowed. All right, there. You so far removed from being a cadet, you got you jumpy, huh?
Next time around.
Yeah, I think Chief, you gotta give us a heads up for those of us who are facing backwards.
So the window opens up the second week in, it's about the second week in November. Based on the way it has been set up in the past, there are time slots and time windows where cadets can go. Priority is given to those cadets who are more senior, who need classes to stay on track for graduation. And there were a number of tests that were done to make sure that that could happen. I would tell you that as I was talking to the dean, what they did test was that students would be able to get the classes that they needed. What they didn't test was that the system would ensure that the folks who needed to remain shut out would be shut out. So you're looking at the positive outcome as opposed to, you know, something else that might impact that. So they didn't test that. On top of that, obviously, we were going through a process of finding the registrar, because the registrar that we hired last summer had tendered his resignation. There was a whole story about that, but I won't go into it. So we had a lean staff. Bob had taken it upon himself to spend a larger majority of his time personally ensuring that the things that they were doing were going to make sure that they met the prioritized efforts that needed to occur, like ensuring we got folks to graduation during that time. What happened was there was a technical glitch in the windows that allowed students who weren't supposed to be able to access the scheduling system it allowed them to get in before their designated time. And so it ended up being a rush on classes, and so a number of students ended up finding themselves waitlisted on a large number of classes, so much so that they weren't carrying full loads. Now, the reality is that every year, this happens to a smaller number of students, right? Somewhere around 40 to maybe 50 students. And then if you all remember the old add drop process, this is the time period that over that window, you go in and you add a class because you might have wanted to get a class and that class is full, or you might have wanted to get a particular faculty member, or you might have wanted to get a particular time. So in this particular case, the numbers were significantly higher, probably about more than double the numbers. So we had about 183 students that had less than the required full load that they needed. This was again second week in November. Okay, it was discovered. New registrar gets hired. She comes on. She works with the team to get us through the priority effort, which was graduation, December graduation, and then she starts working on the work that needs to be done to fix this problem. And so I asked Bob to put together a note that he put and sent out to the students to recognize that, hey, we know that this glitch occurred. Here's what the plan of action is to get it fixed over time. We had set January 10th because students don't get their final schedules until they come back after winter furlough. We'd set a schedule of January 10th for students to be able to go in and access and see what their schedules look like, and then begin to work the process to ensure that they had the full course load that they needed to be qualified as a full-time student. We actually opened it up a day late, so it was on the 11th of January. So with those numbers of 183 by January 22nd, with all the adds and drops, and the first day of classes, which started I think on the 16th, we've gone from 183 to 39 students. Okay, add and drop ends on January 22nd. By the end of add and drop, we had 3 rats who had failed to repeatedly respond to requests to make sure that their schedules were right, but those were the numbers that were remaining. So Bob, IT director, and the director of the registrar's office came in and gave me what amounted to their after action review on what happened. We know what happened with the new registrar. Now that she had to kind of hit the ground running, she certainly knows a lot about the process. She's very, very familiar with colleague, but she had to understand kind of the nuances as it pertains to VMI. There was no time that the system was taken offline. The work was done in such a time where, again, the add and drop process worked as it should. It was just that we had to deal with a larger number of students. And then as of Wednesday, the 24th, every cadet had a full-time schedule. And it was through the work of the registrar, the dean, the IT department, and the department heads to make all of this happen and make sure that no cadets were affected negatively from the standpoint of losing financial aid or anything like that. So any questions on that?
How did it work?
Okay. And so, unless there are any questions, that's all I have for the open session.
Any other questions, comments, Betty?
One question around this email that was shared with us about JLR review of higher education.
Yeah.
It's pretty vague. Any color put on this?
Dallas will be able to provide more of a context. This is something that, and I haven't really delved into it as much, but he did brief me on it. This is an initiative that Chev is doing, and I would probably, I don't wanna tell you wrong,
Okay.
so I think I'd let Dallas just kinda lay out what that is.
Okay. Any other questions, Conrad, anything from you, from Cassie? Good. With that, then let me take the steps to move us into closed session.
Okay.
At this time, it's 5:09, I entertain a motion that the board go into a closed meeting to discuss, number one, matters related to the employment, assignment, appointment, or performance of specific public officers, appointees, or employees of the public body, and evaluation of performance of departments or schools and public institutions of higher education pursuant to VA Code Section 2.2-3711A1, relating to the review of the superintendent's performance objectives and to special staff and evaluation of specific departmental operations. Secondly, consultation with legal counsel regarding specific legal matters requiring the provision of legal advice by such counsel pursuant to VA Code Section 2.2-3711A7 pertaining to actual or probable litigation of the institute. And thirdly, consultation with legal counsel regarding specific legal matters requiring the provision of legal advice by such counsel pursuant to VA Code Section 2.2-3711A8. And I entertain a motion.
So,
Is there a second?
Second.
Any opposed?